This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. Welcome to the show.
This is American Real TV,
There's so much to talk to you about.
where everyone
You are a true inspiration.
has
We're all trying to do our part to change the world.
a story.
What's your mission? What do you want your legacy to be? You have such a great story. I cannot wait to share it. Welcome to the American Real family. I cannot wait to air this episode.
And now, here's your host, Roger Brooks.
A select number of people have been called into spiritual leadership after having some type of mystical experience, or as they say, an awakening. This higher calling happens to people in all walks of life. There is no right or wrong in how people choose to live this out. It is a very personal decision. But this type of collective consciousness seems to be on the rise, especially in our current political and social environments. Many people are interested in learning more about this topic, and one voice leading the discussion is best-selling author Denis Beauséjour, who wrote the book, The Biggest Idea Ever: Trade Anxiety, Fear, and Burnout for Peace, Purpose, and Significance. Denis worked at Procter & Gamble for 22 years, with his last assignment as VP of Advertising, before following his call into spiritual leadership. He completed seminary at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago, then led Answers for Life, the ministry of Dr. Henry Cloud, with Campus Crusade for Christ, now called CRU, CRU. Following that, Denis and his wife, Marianne, were called to lead and serve Marymount Church. Now in retirement, Denis and Marianne continue as spiritual mentors. His memoir tells his adventurous odyssey that follows him through a near-death experience in Japan and into a series of awakenings that made him sought after as a spiritual mentor. The book embodies 4 decades of accumulated wisdom that will help you look at every aspect of your life and chart a fresh journey filled with peace, purpose, and significance. If you are experiencing anxiety, fear, or burnout, or you just want more from life, I can't stress enough that this book is for you. And with that, here's the author, executive, spiritual mentor, and grandfather, Denis Beauséjour. Denis, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Roger, it's great to be with you and your listeners today.
Thank you so much. And I just have to start out by asking, where did the idea come for the title of your book, The Biggest Idea Ever?
Yeah, well, as a vice president of marketing for Procter & Gamble and, an entire career building brands, the search for the big idea, the communication of a big idea in advertising, and something that will change a category or change a brand's trajectory. This was kind of the stock in trade of my time at Procter & Gamble. And so when I heard about this when I had this spiritual awakening, and when I heard about the kingdom of God, it landed on me like the biggest idea I had ever heard. And so I was walking the Camino de Santiago with my wife, and we were having these incredible conversations with, there's like 250,000 pilgrims walk this route through northern Spain every year. And people are heading into churches and stopping at crosses and praying all over the place. And you could see this hunger for people to know God and to know a spiritual life. And so it was in that kind of conversation, that flow, that I just felt I was supposed to write this book. And the title came almost immediately. It was like, of course, the biggest idea ever.
No, right. And I think it's so related to the biggest story ever, which is the story of Jesus. And I don't know if you've been watching this series, The Chosen.
Oh, yeah.
But that, to me, it's just one of the best ever to be able to capture what happened back in those days and just brings it more to reality of okay, this is maybe pretty close to how it may have happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think The Chosen has brought Jesus into just a level of, while being faithful to the biblical account, it is delving into the likely, character traits of some of these people, and it portrays Jesus in just like an approachable, realistic, warm, vulnerable, but also authoritative dude. Like he's
Right.
that. It's really well done.
Yeah,
Really
no,
well
I
done.
agree. I agree. It's actually inspired me personally to, become closer to my own, spiritual side, um, having watched this and,
Hmm.
really looking forward to this new season that just came out.
Yeah, yeah, and they've been very innovative. Even my wife and I went to the theater to watch some episodes this time instead of watching it at home on the app, which was in and of itself incredibly innovative and bypassed the whole normal way of doing things, which I love. I just love.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's totally refreshing, and it's a great encounter
Yeah.
uh, with what he could have been like.
Right.
So,
No, and I encourage our listeners, our viewers to, if they haven't watched it, to
mhm,
watch it because it really does it brings a
yeah,
whole new element of humanity to him
mhm,
and to his apostles and how that all may have come together. I think they did that very well. And then there's certainly specific characters like Matthew and who
right.
could imagine, how this
Mhm.
all came to be back then and how they lived. And, he was a tax collector and then turned apostle. So just really,
Yep.
really well done.
Yeah, no, excellent. And it's what they do is they completely eliminate religiosity. And it's authentic, and it's real and approachable, and that's actually very much what I tried to do in the book, is to make it very approachable and relatable and vulnerable and authentic. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and if we could transition into that, would love to learn more about how you built the framework for this book. As you know, I like to interview a lot of authors, and
Mm,
everyone has their own way of doing things, but you had this experience on the walk and you decided to write this book. Using your marketing background, came up with the wonderful title. But can you help us understand how
mm,
did the framework come to be, and what did you pull from your background to make it all
mm.
come together, and maybe how long it took you to actually do?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Um, so I gave it the way I came to it was with a mind map. So I had basically a picture, and I had arcs, and I'm trying to look at the arc of my life, which I journal, and so I was able to refer back to some different things, but primarily it was remembering, my own story. So the arc of my story, then the arc of the biblical story to try to frame that up, and then the arc of the people that I've been privileged to be a spiritual mentor to, and some of their stories. And so it became sort of mapping out, how God moved in my 2 decades at P&G, how he moved as my 2 decades as a spiritual mentor and a pastor, and then how the biblical story wove itself through that. And so I would say it took about a week of laying out what I call the mind map, and laying out the chapter flow and the idea flow and the stories that I would include, in each section. And then I began writing, and I only had one really good advice about writing, which was to write, and so I set aside. I visited my sister. She has a wonderful basement that's very quiet, and I went down there. My wife is very good friends with my sister, and so between 8 o'clock and lunch, between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock, then we took a 1 hour walk, my wife and I, and then we had dinner with my sister and her husband, and the book poured out of me in 26 days of that. So literally,
Man.
I wrote 6, 7 hours a day for 26 days, and it came out at about 85,000 words. And of course, it's gone through a lot of morphing since then. But that was how the first bit of it came out. Yeah.
Oh, no, thank you for sharing that with us because everyone, as I mentioned, I talk to has their own method. Haven't heard one quite like yours, so that's really interesting. It sounds like almost a full month of doing
Yep.
this consistently every day
Yep.
got you that first draft that you needed to really build off of. So
Yep.
just
Yeah.
wonderful to hear. So do they live do they live far away from you? Did you make this a month-long trip?
Yeah, so I was actually on a sabbatical from, I retired from church work. We went to Europe, we walked the Camino, we stayed 3 months in Europe. I followed the footsteps of the Apostle Paul through Turkey and Greece. I followed the life of John through the seven churches of Revelation we visited. And then I visited Israel for about 2 weeks. I've already spent probably an entire year in Israel if I add up all the time, looking at archaeology and all that. And then when we came back, we were supposed to be in a friend's beach house in Naples, and Hurricane Ian put some serious damage on their house. So I ended up at my sister's, which is in Toronto. So November and December of 2022 in Toronto compared to a beach in Naples. But I wonder if I would have had the discipline to write the book in Naples with the sun shining and the beach
True.
beckoning.
A lot more temptation down there, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, Dennis, curious on something you call the good life. If you could
Mm,
expand upon that and just help us understand from your perspective,
mhm.
what does that mean? What is it all about?
Yeah, it's such a topic for philosophers and sages throughout the ages. And for me, it's the question we all have to answer, isn't it? It's the question of what am I shooting for? What is the good life? And I think there's an American dream narrative of working hard, raising up a family, owning your own home, building up retirement, and having a time of freedom where you can do pretty well whatever you want. And that comes out of obviously the Declaration and the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Um, what is interesting about that word happiness is that it's actually or came out of the Greek word eudaimonia, and this is a huge idea in ancient Greek philosophy, uh, where Aristotle and others pursued kind of like what this is. And obviously, the meaning of words changes over time. But for us, happiness is the pizza makes me happy, or my birthday party makes me happy. But what I think the framers of our Constitution and the philosophers of old were focusing on is happiness as a condition of deep-seated joy, of deep-seated well-being, of deep-seated satisfaction with what we have, the life that we have made for ourselves. And we all have one life. We all have 24 hours a day and maybe 70, 80, 90 years. So we have to think about, and I think most people at some point really think about. But as I scoped out the trajectory of this thinking of the good life, I started with the Greeks, and I talk a little bit about that in my book, and then I continued on through the sages, the Jewish sages, and the the sages of the church. But I kept coming back to Jesus, and I kept seeing, wow, in the Sermon on the Mount, he basically lays out what the good life is, and he is specific. But what's beautiful about it is he he articulates it in a way that it is available to anyone of any intelligence, of any socioeconomic class, of any race, of any gender, because it is founded in the principles, which essentially revolve around knowing God, loving your neighbor, treating others the way you want them to treat you, the golden rule. And this has, been the central anchor of Western civilization for 2,000 years, very enduring. And then I looked at some modern philosophers. My favorite is Dallas Willard, who is the chair of the philosophy department of the University of Southern California. And he, incredibly well read through all the Greek, all the Latin, all the early church, but a student of Jesus and a student of philosophy. And he had the intellectual underpinning in his books that I've studied for years. And he is the one that really helped me open up, to what the life of wisdom really is, the good life. And so I would say give him a lot of credit. And that's chapter 2 of my book. So I've given you kind of almost a brief outline, but it is that deep, long-lasting satisfaction that I've made good choices, I've impacted the ones around me, and I've impacted the ones next to me in a good way over time.
Yeah, and as a spiritual mentor, how do you help people just see this, right? Because I think the average person, and we all kind of look at our own experience and our own life and how we were raised and all that, but it seems if we're not pointed in a direction to even think about this, the days become weeks, which become months, which become years, and time goes by, and this is not a focal point, let alone an afterthought. Like it's not central to someone's thinking. But as a spiritual mentor, how do you advise helping people to even start on this path if it's not been included at all, or maybe bits and pieces here and there?
Yeah, it's really an art, of course, but I think I try to understand people's childhood and how they came and really what their God story is. Because for some people, the God story is traumatic. It's like, brutal religiosity, getting stuff shoved down your throat. For others, life has brought serious trauma, where if I look at, what we see in the youth of today, several, just a high percentage are dealing with, they're raised by one parent. They're raised in a lower income environment where it's survival is just the basic drift from day to day. So I really seek to understand, what I would call the foundational assumptions that they have come to in looking at the purpose of their life. And from there, I try to ask questions about the things they're pursuing right now. If I'm talking to a 19-year-old who's playing video games for 30 hours every week, I start to ask questions. What do you get out of that? What are the highlights of that for you? And oftentimes I find it is searching for community. In one case, a young man was doing that, and his best friend was in Australia, and he was playing this video game, and then he gets a message from that friend's mother that he committed suicide. And you try to say to that person, "Oh my gosh, that was so traumatic." So I try to understand, and then I try to help them ask questions and help them discern what is the goal structure. And this young man's goal structure was to have community in through this game slash sport. And so then it was from there the question of, okay, well, where else could you find this, and where else have you had glimpse of it in your life? And then you go through, and you're really trying to help people awaken to a goal that is achievable, maybe a step forward, maybe a risk or a challenge that could bring new levels of eudaimonia, new levels of happiness and joy. And then obviously other assumptions about life and life after life, and just try to, like my grade 8 teacher brought us to the symphony and to the opera and to the stage, and opened our eyes to this whole world that was out there. So in a sense, I try to open eyes to the larger things of life that can really alter a person's experience, and bless them.
And what about for those who are not spiritual leaders, right? Average people that go about their days and run into situations where they might be helpful. Do you feel it's our role to help guide others in certain ways? Maybe we were put there at that moment for a specific reason, or do we not so much interfere? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah. Um, you know, I would say, so look at love your neighbor. What does love your neighbor mean? And who is your neighbor? Jesus in the parable of the Good Samaritan teaches us that our neighbor is the person whose path we cross at that particular moment in time. So, uh, and he stops, he takes care of the person, bandages the wound, puts him on his donkey, takes him to the inn, and then tells the innkeeper, hey, here's some money, and if you need more, I'll catch you on the way back. So this person is not getting over involved, is not becoming codependent, but is giving help, meaningful help along the way. And I think we all have that opportunity to be a light for another person. It might be helping an elderly person across the street. It might be helping a harried mother get her groceries into the car so she can put the kids in their car seats. It can be all kinds of things. It could even be giving your seat up on an airplane so uh, you know a man and his girlfriend can sit together instead of being separated. But and I think in the larger scheme, we have become kind of an expert culture. And I think Jesus was saying, no, the ordinary person can enjoy the kingdom. And so I think there's always a time for experts. There's always a time for experts who can help you get your book published, experts who are pastors and seminary trained. There's experts who are psychologists and psychiatrists, and those always play a role. But in the interim, anyone we come across can be someone that we have been destined to help. And it could be a 5-minute interaction, a 30-second interaction, or it could be a little bit longer.
And as I get older, and I try to do as much reading and as I can to learn from philosophers of the past and current. But when it comes to wisdom specifically, how does that fit into your mission of what you're trying to do day to day? Is that something you try to help instill in people to look to that wisdom, or is it your own wisdom that you're trying to pass down, or both?
Yeah, it's good. Um, I think it's a little bit of both. So according to the scriptures, there is a body of wisdom, and you could extend to that morality and ethics that are found in the teachings of Jesus, and also, in the Proverbs and other Jewish wisdom literature, and wisdom literature from many cultures. The African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. And so, but what is wisdom? And my working definition of wisdom is not limited to knowledge. Yes, knowledge is a part of it, but wisdom is essentially the ability to practice a life well lived.
Hmm.
And so it is, the proof of the pudding of wisdom is a life well lived. And so, many people write books, and they have not lived out. They have got some kind of huge insight, but they haven't lived it out. Um, and I was never feeling like writing a book, as I was trying to work out raising teenagers and turning boys into men, and living long enough to know that my health, my financials, my relationships, were in a healthy pattern. So wisdom is a life well lived, and so I think it can be gained in reading, definitely, because knowledge is a key component of that. But it also has to be gained by application. And so, when the Lord said to the Jews, "Hear, O Israel," that word there is Shema, Shema Israel. And so the Jews will call that prayer they say 3 times a day the Shema. Well, that word means to hear, it means to understand, and it also means to obey. So that's the difference between, I read a book and yes, I know intellectually, but now I've put that book into practice. And I think this is one of the reasons that, Atomic Habits is doing so well, because he is focusing us on putting it into practice. And so people are actually experiencing, transformation and a life that is being lived in a better way.
Dennis, how do you help people who fall off, right? We all fall off at some point,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's hard to get back on the path, the right path. And
Hmm.
it's sometimes easier, whatever it may be, just to continue on that other path that's probably not the right one.
Yeah.
How do we help people, get back on track?
Yeah, boy. There's so much wisdom needed in that, isn't there? But there's a scene in the Gospels where Jesus is talking to the boys, and uh, he's telling them, "Look, you got to forgive others who disappoint you and fall short." And Peter said, "Oh yeah, Lord, are we going to forgive him like 7 times?" And of course, the rabbis of the day were saying 3. And Peter's being magnanimous. "Oh, I'm going to forgive him 7 times." And Jesus says, "Actually, you need to forgive him 70 times 7 times."
Indefinite.
And, which is essentially an indefinite, thing. He's actually the only other time in the Bible that number, that 77s is mentioned, is 77 times, is in Genesis chapter 4, verse 24. And it's the nastiest dude in all of the Bible, who's got multiple wives, and he's just a miserable guy. And I think Jesus is alluding, like, even forgive that guy. So you have to be careful and wise about it. But anybody who comes uh, and is willing to repent and start over, who's looking for help, then you need to at least hear them out. And I mean, this is the beauty of AA, right? Because anybody can come to any AA meeting and can say, I'm, I'm an alcoholic and I've fallen off the wagon. This is my first meeting in 2 years. And generally, they will be heard, they will be encouraged, and they will find a sponsor, and they will be led, And similarly, you would hope that in every church, if someone popped in who was just in a very bad way, but willing, looking for grace, looking for a new start, would be, given that opportunity. And of course, the worst thing is, of course, when the person after several go rounds is not growing, is not changing, is not really intending to change. And then in that case, you have to make some decisions and apply some consequences. Let them experience consequences before. And my dad battled alcohol, went into rehab 4 times, relapse after relapse after relapse, lived in our home for a while, and would not obey our no smoking rule, nearly burned my house down, and eventually burned all the bridges, all the friends. And he was living, on a park bench. And I was in Australia at the time, but my 3 sisters, we did everything we could possibly do. And there's just times when there's nothing you can do. And you have to know that it's time to turn them over to the Lord, turn them over to God, and pray that something happens. And my dad eventually passed away of cancer, and I saw him the couple of weeks he was in the hospital before he died, and we got sorted out. We're able to say, "I love you." We're able to say, "I forgive you," but he just couldn't. He couldn't function. So it's hard. There's no easy answers.
Right. And speaking of forgiveness, sometimes hard for people to apologize.
Mm.
Um, how do you help people through that as a
Mm.
spiritual mentor? How do I, an argument with the spouse or with a child or a friend or a coworker, but it's difficult or challenging for the individual to voice it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. The one of the chapters of my book talks about the 2 gifts that God has given us to be able to live together in community: repentance and forgiveness. And they're both extremely challenging. They both involve getting off the throne and releasing our pride and releasing our the grace that we have the power to give to others. But yeah, I mean, there are times where you cannot get people to see how they are harming others. There's a narcissist uh, personality disorder that is or a borderline personality disorder that is really, really difficult. And there are some times. But generally speaking, what I try to do is show that forgiveness is available to you from God by grace, by faith, and forgiveness is extendable by you to others. And the Lord's Prayer says, "Forgive others, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive others who trespass against us." And a little bit later, he repeats that. So there's a reciprocity of that. But to ask for forgiveness is to admit that you're wrong. To ask for forgiveness is to see how you've hurt the other person. And to ask for forgiveness is to literally throw yourself at their mercy. So that can be pretty difficult if you're a proud person. And then, forgiveness is not, you know, condoning what was done. Forgiveness is simply transferring the debt, from that, what that person has done to you, transfer the debt to Jesus and let him, take care of it. And of course, he will take care of it, because whoever has hurt you, if they seek Jesus for forgiveness, they'll be forgiven completely. And if they don't, then they will have to deal with the consequences of being unforgiving and not having faith, not believing. So it's tough, and probably, I think of my wife and I, when I after the earthquake, and the near-death experience that I had in Kobe, Japan, I started realizing, wow, I'm I haven't even been asking any of these questions of life, So it's not just people with trauma and people who have been disadvantaged, but it's also people who are wealthy and busy. They're so wealthy and so busy, they've never thought about the big picture meaning of life. And that was me, and I was like skyrocketing. And after that, I started auditing my life, and I started realizing, oh my gosh, I am an absentee father. I am a glutton. I am a drunk. I am an adulterer. I'm unfaithful to my wife. I've been successful, but like, if you look at the outside, it might look okay, but in the inside, I was highly, highly dissatisfied, highly broken by my own self-centeredness, and starting to ask some of those questions, and eventually coming to the point of, an encounter with Jesus, and then unpacking that and coming into a conversation with my wife about everything I had done. And her response was just pure forgiveness. She just said, look, I know that I've been forgiven everything I've ever done, and I'm going to forgive you, and we are going to start over. And that to me was the picture. And I was repentant. I mean, I told her, here's how I've hurt you, here's what I've done wrong, and she forgave me. And there's something so freeing about that, something that removes bitterness and removes fear and removes anxiety, because you realize that there's a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth chance.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. Powerful, very powerful. Early on, you talked about the American dream
Mm.
and, how the framers may have thought about that. But when it comes to growth and growth of an individual, whether it's spiritual growth or, business growth in the workplace,
Yeah,
how does growth play into what you do and how you define it in your world?
yeah. Growth is, the fundamental nature of the creation and of the kingdom. Um, so, the world was created to produce uh, increase in population, increase in food production, increase in quality of life, increase in knowledge, increase in understanding. The world's universities, the world's hospitals, the world's scientific endeavor, the world's population. And God's been faithful. There's actually plenty of food being produced on the world, which is kind of what he promised Noah after the flood, that there's enough on the to feed everyone. Now, of course, he's done his part, but we don't distribute it evenly or productively or wisely. So we still haven't mastered that yet. But there's some indices that have been tracked, and in terms of the affordability of food and the quality of food and so on. So there's growth, and we were told to multiply and to fill the earth. And, whenever we don't do that, the cultures like Japan and China that are not having enough children to keep going. And, actually in Western Europe, and it would be our case too if it wasn't for immigration. Um, but that is the fundamental construction, and the same goes in the world of investment, compound interest, um, innovation, new companies being created. I just saw yesterday that NVIDIA has packed on 200 and some odd $billion in market cap in one day, which is the value of the entire Coca-Cola company, and
Unbelievable.
now is worth more than Alphabet. Just amazing, So invention, innovation, growth, those things are built into the nature, of the periodic table, the nature of the cosmos, the nature of physics, and the same goes with spiritual. That we are meant to be able to understand and embrace and grow in new ways. So my pursuit of growth, revolves around the stuff we've been talking about already, which is, what is my vision of the good life? What is my vision for my family? What is the vision for my work? And how can I reduce waste? How can I improve my effectiveness? And so I think, there's a never-ending possibility of growth. And when I look at what the Bible says about eternity, we are going to be, in resurrection bodies in a new cosmos, a new earth that will be merged with the heaven. And we will be living on a planet here, and we will be learning, working, inventing, creating for all of eternity, because that was the way we were originally created to be. And God's going to get his project done, and he's going to get it done. And every day we'll learn something new about him, and there'll be no end to that. So I see growth as a basic human desire for all of us. So I try to tap into goals and dreams. My wife and I every week have a date night, and most of the time we will finish the evening by saying, "What are you dreaming about right now?"
Hmm.
And we will be encouraging each other to think about, what might be next.
I love that. I love that. Um, yeah, so we've talked about love thy neighbor and how important that is earlier on.
Mm.
And what I want to get to is your points about generosity and the
Uh,
importance of that generosity, what that means, and then kind of a two-part question, how that generosity helps others, but then something that you talk about, which is family flourishing. If you could touch on those two topics, please.
yeah, that's great. So because of the goodness of God, and his giving us the direction for the good life, uh, and because of the growth of the fundamental growth of the kingdom, the growth that's been baked into creation, then generosity is a big natural outcome of that. You know, for God so loved that he gave his only son for us. Uh, you know, the generosity of God in, look, he was perfectly happy, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, for all eternity. They had perfect fellowship. They didn't need us. They weren't lonely. Some people talk about God created because he was lonely. No, he wasn't. He had perfect fellowship, but he decided in his goodness to create and involve us in his project, and to be able to enjoy his goodness, his generosity. And so throughout the Bible, you have this picture, and Jesus talked about it often, the Father's house. in my Father's house there are many mansions, and I'm making one for you. So the whole project is to open people's eyes to the generosity of the Father, through his Son, through the pouring out of the Holy Spirit, through the Bible, through the nature of creation. And now we get to participate in that. And so generosity is the basic calling that we have as we love one another, as we love our neighbors. So how do we practice that? And generosity is, just such a privilege, and it's seeing the abundance of the kingdom, and knowing that as we share, God is willing to give us more and more and more. So for me, raised in a very scarcity mentality home, this was a challenge. I'm like, what does this mean? And I, was making tons of money, but I wasn't particularly generous. I gave to my college once in a while. If I had a family member or an extended family member who needed money, I would, give them a couple $100 here and there, but nothing serious. And when I learned that the starting point for kingdom generosity is what the ancient Jews called the tithe, or 1/10, then, making a 7-figure income, I'm now writing a 3-figure check. Sorry, a 6-figure check.
Right.
And that first one I wrote was like, whew, man, I don't know about this. And anyway, the moment I wrote it and I put it in the envelope and sent it in, something broke inside of me, and I just felt this wave of uh, trust and excitement. And when I learned that, everything that I'm doing by faith, gets tacked on to my account. We all have an account in heaven that gets tacked on. Uh, it broke something in me, and we've pretty much learned over time to grow that 10% to 20 and 25%. And the crazy thing is like he owns it all. He owns 100%,
Right.
and we're just managers,
Yeah.
But learning to give and watching the impact, of giving. And like, for example, my wife and I, we were made aware of a young family of missionary family that they were looking to. They had 2 kids. They were looking to buy a house, and the Lord kind of, we just prayed, and then we both wrote down a number, and it was the same number. And we gave that number to this young couple, and they were able to buy a house with the down payment. And it was like, and now we've known that college students have been in that house every Monday and Wednesday night for 15 years. And many of them have come to know the freedom that Jesus offers and the peace that Jesus offers. So generosity, begets generosity. And then, to the family, if you look at Psalm 112, it says, blessed are the generous, their children will be mighty in the land, and they will never fear anything.
Mm.
And these are huge promises of living a generous life. And so we just started, learning that, teaching it to our kids, going on mission trips. We went on a mission trip once to Philippines, to Cebu, and we were getting in the minivan to go to the airport at the end, and my kids came out. They were hugging and kissing these orphan kids that we'd been with for a whole week, and they had no shoes on. They had given away their shoes, their baseball caps, their backpacks. They had given away everything. And they got on the bus with, t-shirts and shorts, and they were waving and kissing, and everything. And I just realized, like, wow, they are learning the joy of generosity, and which is really learning how to be like Jesus.
Yes.
And so we've tried to build that into our family and into our generations, and now we have 10 grandchildren, number 11 on the way. And we've continued with our giving to pour into their education, because one of the proverbs says, the wise leave an inheritance to their grandchildren. And
Mm.
so we're just trying to do what it says, And in the moment, I can honestly say, like, we have not experienced fear or anxiety about money for the last 30 years. And yeah, our net worth has gone down dramatically from what it was, but our kingdom worth, our kingdom account has grown and grown and grown. So, we're all going to die, and nobody can take anything with them. And so we're sending it on ahead.
Awesome. Dennis, how important is the dignity of our work and what we
Oh,
do?
yeah. Yeah, it's so good. The first two chapters of the Bible uh, and the last two chapters of the Bible are very clear that in the original created order and in eternity, we will be working. So work is designed by God as a fundamental part of human existence. And we need to work. And we can see it when people are out of work, they're desperate. They're missing a big part of their life, and they know it. And so, to think about work as a paradigm of the opportunity to bless others, the opportunity to do what you do well, to bless other people. And I just think about, uh, the Yeti drink cooler that is well designed, the car that is well designed and requires very little maintenance, the accountant who does your taxes and does them honestly, the banks who keep track through meticulous processes how much is actually in your account. Can you imagine going to the bank and, oh, sorry, we made a mistake in your account and we have no idea how much money you have left? So I think quality work is like baked into a fundamentally good life and existence. And so we all do something. And my garbage man, who comes to my house every Tuesday morning, he comes at different times, but I always try to go out and say thank you, because can you imagine how many people are saying thank you to their garbage man? And secondly, what would it be like if they didn't pick up the garbage? And we've seen garbage
Right.
strikes.
Sure.
It's a disaster.
Yes.
We turn into a third world country in 3 weeks.
Yes.
So that's the beauty of work, is the dignity, the quality, the value. And so if we can bring that paradigm, and the Hebrew language has a word called avodah, and that word was mentioned in the context of the priests doing their work at the altar in giving the sacrifices. And it means both work and worship.
Hmm.
And so I in the book, I just talk about there's some very easy thinking changes that you can make to turn your work into worship. And there's a lot of people who say, "Wow, I wish I was a pastor. I wish I could be a missionary." I had a doctor who was like that, and I said, "Dude, how many patients do you see every week?" And he goes, "Yeah, somewhere about 25 a day, so somewhere between 100 and 125 every day." And um, he's dealing with life and death situations. I said, "Dude, you have a every month you're seeing 500 people. That's bigger than my church."
Yeah, that's missionary work.
Yeah, and so if that's what God's called you to do, 50 hours a week, then that's your worship.
Yeah.
And I will say to anybody that anyone who does their work for the benefit of others and the glory of God is way more holy and way more precious in God's sight than a pastor or priest who's just going through the motions.
Dennis, this has been a wonderful conversation. I do
Yeah.
have one last question, and before I let you go, and that is, how do we finish strong?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, how do we do that?
Yeah, it is really important. And we've talked about the good life and knowing yourself a little bit. It's important to recognize that, life is a marathon. And I've seen so many people, even in retirement, fritter away their years and get, lost in, social life, get lost in drinking or whatever it might be, and finish poorly. And many characters in the Bible finish poorly because they did not keep their pride in check. They abused their power. They had money and sex problems, and so the recipe to finish strong is to stay connected to God, to lean into Jesus, to follow him every day, hear from him every day, and to recognize that, yeah, there will be suffering. I'm going to have a knee replacement next month, and it's going to be brutal for a while. And life isn't always easy, but to stay connected to Jesus and to be in community, to be, a person who is open to hearing from other people and to growing and keep being generous and keep connected to Jesus.
Wonderful. Dennis, if people want to reach out to you and want to connect to you, what's the best way for them to do that and also to get your book?
Yeah, so if you go to denisbeauséjour.com, you can, there's a link there to buy the book. There's also free resources, and there's an opportunity to ask a question or get connected through that. And I'm happy to, I keep an eye on it daily, and I'm looking forward to connecting with anyone who wants to live the biggest idea ever.
I love it. Denis Beauséjour, thank you so much. Welcome to the American Real family, and I cannot wait to air this episode.
Yeah, well, thank you, Roger. You have been a man of integrity, and you have really helped me in the process, so I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to American Real. For more stories like this one, be sure to stop by AmericanReal.tv. Follow us on all social media to stay up to date with everything American Real. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and contact one of our publishing experts if you're ready to publish your book and become a best-selling author.